Do do. All right, and then let me just tweet this out. We're live with Eric Schultz. So it's the part I hate. One of the parts I hate the most is you have to take those extra couple of seconds to, type everything out and make sure that you share and plug all the social medias, etc.
All the socials.
All the socials. So many socials. All right, so we're all ready to go. Okay, count this down in 3, 2. Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is a very special episode. This is issue number 84. We are speaking to one of our favorite people. This is a third time on the show now, second full interview, plus I'll count the interview we did at New York Comic Con, the amazingly talented, and I also might add a wonderful person, which is just as important to mention, Erica Schultz. Erica, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. I'll be sure to send the check for that.
I swear no, but I feel like it's important to not only mention that you are talented, but also that you are a wonderful person. Because
so not all talented people are jerks. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes, and not all wonderful people have talent. So
I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
So as we said, this is your third appearance now on the show. I think once you hit 5, we need to get you a jacket or a pin or something.
Well, it
it's like
wasn't
SNL.
a big thing. Yeah, I was gonna say like a big thing with SNL. Once you hit 5, it's like you get the jacket or you get I don't know, cheese was in the face or something.
Tom Hanks welcomes you into the club. Steve
Exactly.
Martin is there. Yeah, the whole 5 Timers Club. So this is 3. So you're well on your way.
Woohoo! Round in the corner.
There you go. You're more than halfway there. So for those of you who do not know, we had Erica on first time last year to speak about her project, 12 Devils Dancing, which I absolutely adored. And then we had an opportunity to speak to you again at New York Comic Con. And at that point, Forgotten Home had just been announced. And I also recall when we were talking about 12 Devils Dancing, we asked you, well, what are you working on next? And you said, well, I've got this little project I'm working on, but I can't really say anything about it just yet. And so then we talked to you at New York Comic Con, and it had just been announced, and I think maybe it was coming out that week or the week after. And now we speak to you and Forgotten Home has just ended. So at least for me, I feel this connection to this project because I was there, I knew about it before it was announced. And then I was right there when it was formally announced. And now we're here. I feel like I've been with this project from conception to graduation.
Well, to be honest, it was conceived probably back in 2014, but from announcement to graduation. How's that?
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
See, there you go. Pissing in the cornflakes.
Oh, I'm the person with the big. I have the big pin, and I just go and pop everybody's balloon.
That's okay. We love you for it. It's part of your charm.
Exactly.
So for those newer listeners who haven't yet had an opportunity to go back and listen to the previous 2 times you were on the show, why don't you just give us a little bit of background? Some of the stuff you've worked on previously. Just a little 30-second elevator pitch. Who is Erica Schultz?
Erica Schultz is a writer who's done work for Marvel, DC, Dynamite, Action Lab, which is where 12 Devils Dancing is. Comixology Originals, which is where Forgotten Home is. I'm also an instructor at the Kubert School, which is also known as Comic Book College. And I'm an instructor. I'm a lettering and production instructor at Comics Experience, which is online comic book college, for lack of a better term.
But I think you need to do more. Do you juggle? Do you TikTok?
No, I'm terrible at juggling. I played a circus. I played a circus performer in a community theater play back in 1991, and the only thing I could do was a cartwheel. And they tried to teach me to juggle, and I couldn't do it.
Well, there's no
So
time like the present to learn, because it seems like you've got a lot of free time on your hands. So maybe you should pick that up.
yeah, I have
Oh, man.
so much free time on my hands. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about Forgotten Home. The purpose of this interview. Let's talk about that. So I think we may have talked about it a little bit at New York Comic Con, but what was the genesis for this project? What was the inspiration, et cetera? What made you think this is the story I want to tell?
Originally, it was the anti-Frozen. So everybody was talking when Frozen first came out, and everyone and their mother was singing "Let It Go." I I have this thing, kind of like, popping people's balloons. It's this idea of like, if it's got that much hype, it can't be that good. So when everybody was talking about how Frozen was the second coming, I was like, yeah, no, I don't want anything to do with it, because I know that it's not that good and everybody's just sort of like, swept up in this. So I started doing a story about two sisters that absolutely hate each other, and that are like evil and warring factions kind of thing. And it ended up splitting into something else. But there were a couple of bits and bobs left over that I sort of swept up with the hair on the carpet and molded it together. And that was sort of the seeds for Forgotten Home that, started taking off on its own. But the idea was always to have something in sort of like an alternate sort of universe. And then when it became Forgotten Home, we sort of anchored it in Earth and then brought it to Janata, which is the secondary location, which is where pretty much 90%, 95% of the story takes place in this, other world. But we wanted to bring you in on Earth just so you didn't feel like we were throwing you out, without any type of tether to reality.
No, that was definitely apparent. And, on Earth, I always love, it's a personal thing, but I love the trope where you see parallel things happening and they're slightly different, but there's that similarity there. And it's the scene where Lorraine is coming home and Joe is with the Jacob brothers. And it's that, don't be, it's pretty cool. It's pretty hot,
Yeah, she's carrying the pizza. Yeah.
That mirror down that page. That's a personal thing. I love when that trope is done, when it's done well, when it's done organically well. And I think this was an excellent example of that. And I also appreciate throughout the book a number of the callbacks, both from a writing standpoint and then also from a visual standpoint. The moment where Queen Ronnie awakens Joanna, calls back to, or is it foreshadowing? I forget which one we see first, but
we see the interaction with her sister first.
Okay, we do see the interaction with her sister. I'm trying to avoid major spoilers, but we do see, from the visual perspective, there's that again, that mirroring. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. Speaking of the imagery, Marika Cresta, how did she come on board? Was it a situation where she was like your first choice as an artist, or were you sort of, from a procedural standpoint, I don't exactly know how that works, where an artist and a writer come together on a project. So
I had actually, Marika was a choice that I hadn't been familiar with her. Actually, I was having a conversation with my friend James Emmett, who's an editor, and he and I are working together on another project. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm looking for an artist for this project. And I told him about it. And he was like, oh, let me give you a few names. I'll email you a few names. And Marika was one of them. And I looked up her work and I thought she was fantastic. So I reached out and she had an opening. And I said, okay, well, this is going to be an 8-issue series. This is going to be, a commitment. And she's like, I like the story. I like where it's going. Let's do this. And off we went. The poor woman was tethered to me for almost a year, but no, she did an amazing job. One of the best things as a writer is when you get pages back and the artist does something that you didn't even think of visually. And because I've worked as a background artist, I've worked as an inker and stuff. I tend to think very visually. If something is confusing and I can't articulate it, I'll do thumbnails and things like that. I try and help the artist out as much as possible. But Marika came back with some stuff that was just like, she really blew my mind in the way she was thinking of the world. She is an architect by training, and there was something that she did. Again, we don't want to do spoilers, but it's in the beginning of book 6 where we're seeing this, you know, the aftermath of a battle. And there was something that I noticed that she did where there's a spear in the ground with sort of like a ribbon almost on it. And what that does is that anchors the location. So any other place that you move, that spear is in the background. So you know where you are in relation to it. I mean, it's something that I didn't even think to do. But it's, you know, she did it, and it actually, I mean, it helped her just in general as a, to sort of stage out the scene and stuff. But, yeah, she's just phenomenal. She really is. And now she's working on Dr. Aphra for Star Wars and Marvel. So I wish her nothing but amazing luck and success. And if I get to work with her again, you know, that'll be great.
So, wow, I did not know she was working on Dr. Aphra. Okay, well then I will definitely have to give that book a read then. I've heard nothing but good things about just the character in general, but now that we know that she's on it, I have to.
I'm going to be honest here. That is amazing in terms of just thinking about settings and backgrounds in comics. I mean, obviously this is your forte, but I hadn't really thought about it that way. That's amazing, just to make sure that everything is kept in place that way.
Well, you think about it, I mean, like the scene is literally just this like sort of giant battlefield. I mean, you think of like the photos that you've seen of like Gettysburg, like that was kind of like the reference point.
Right.
But the fact that she had this one spear just sort of like sticking out, and then as you went page to page, it was somewhere in the background. So it gave you some sort of like, it was kind of like a compass, you know, it gave you a North Star, which I thought was so fantastic. So I was just, you know, every page that I got, it was bowled me over. She really is and she's a wonderful person. She's incredibly sweet, and she really is a very talented woman and very skilled woman. And I really hope that she does like amazing things.
Well, she's booked on Dr. Aphra, so that's.
Yes, exactly. So that is definitely, you know, she's definitely got a lot of good stuff ahead of her.
Yeah, that's an incredibly high profile gig. So I know when we spoke at Comic-Con, and I think I may have asked you this question to some extent, but I remember you mentioned that when we spoke at Comic-Con that several of your characters have a lot of daddy issues, and instead this one has mommy issues.
Mommy issues.
So how much of Erica Schultz is in Lorraine and Joanna and Queen Ronnie?
I would say there's a good amount of me in all of them, because they're not specifically super ego id, but you can kind of see a little bit of it there. You know, like Joanna, obviously she's a 14, almost 15-year-old teenager. Of course she's going to be impulse. Like that's, you know, teenagers have zero impulse control. Teenage girls have even less than that. You know, so she's obviously not 100% id, but she's driven by her emotions. She's driven by, you know, there's like zero forethought in anything. It's, I got to go do something, or I want to go do something, and I'm going to go do it. And hell if I know if it's going to work out. Lorraine is the most measured, but at the same time, she is a hot mess too. You know, I mean, just because they both, you know, Joanna makes a lot of mistakes, but she's a teenager. She's allowed to. When you're an adult and you make a lot of mistakes, especially when you're a parent and you make a lot of mistakes, there's this like horrible, you know, curse over you because, you know, parents are supposed to have all the answers. And I know as a teenager, I thought parents had all the answers. I actually have a very strong memory of sitting in my best friend's parents' house and complaining about my mom, and my best friend's mom saying to me, you know, we're human too. And that was like a revelation to me, you know, 16-year-old Erica sitting at the breakfast bar going, wait, what? Like, it didn't click with me that parents are actual human beings. You know, what a surprise, you know, kind of thing. And it sounds stupid, you know, 20, almost 30 years on, it sounds like a stupid revelation, but I mean, it hits. So, and Joanna kind of has that revelation as well. But Ronnie is just unchecked power. You know, she is unchecked power and control. And I would love to have that much control and power over people.
Wouldn't we all?
Exactly.
Hey, I wouldn't. Damn it. I always rebel against that. But then again, that's a different story. That's my issue. Never mind.
But I mean, like, just, you know, to have just sort of this, you know, do what I say or get out of my way kind of thing. In certain cases, that is a very enticing offer. But yeah, I mean, I think that Lorraine, I wanted to show I didn't want anybody to accuse her of being a Mary Sue. So, which I think is just a stupid thing to begin with, but I wanted the idea of, yes, she's the hero, she's the chosen one, and she not only falls flat on her face, but she falls flat on her face down a mountain, past the bushes, into like the bog of eternal stench, and then has to find her way to climb back up. You know, she messed over a whole bunch of people, and she's got to eat crow for that. She's got to find her daughter. She's got to find other kids. She's got to, you know, she always thinks that she's doing the right thing, and it's just not turning out the way she wants it to, no matter how hard she tries. And I think that that's a relatable thing. I think that that's something very relatable, not just for parents, but just for people in general. You know, you work really hard at something, you try really, really hard for something to work out, and sometimes it just doesn't. And there are people who will be paralyzed by that. And then there are people who will say, all right, let's try and find another way. There are moments in this story where Lorraine is paralyzed by that. And I think at some moments she almost takes solace in that as a way of just being like, oh, so I'm not the chosen one. Okay, I'm done with this responsibility stuff. But then that's when the supporting characters sort of come in and build her up and say, no, you know, you think that you're just a cog in this. You're really not. Like, you're the clockmaker. Like, we need you.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I personally can't relate to the whole failure thing, but
you know, well, we can't all be perfect, Anthony. We cannot all be perfect, but you know.
Oh
yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I mean, even your description with that, I mean, that's classic. I know sometimes when we mention things like, sometimes we go with the dramatic of PTSD when we think of fight or flight when it comes to stress. I mean, it doesn't have to get to that point. It simply is, you have major choices that you have to make. And the idea that sometimes you just want to, you know, just kind of throw your hands up and just put it, you know, just put it away. I can't do it. Not right now anyway. Maybe I'll come back to it later.
I'm out of spoons.
Yeah.
as the expression goes. So Lorraine, I think one of the biggest things, at least from my perspective, from my reading, is that she tries so hard, and so much of the story is centered around the fact that she's trying to keep Joanna safe, and it backfires on her spectacularly.
Yes, spectacularly.
And so what was, I guess, the idea behind that was trying to show, I guess, was there a message you were trying to get across about parenting, that no matter how hard you try to protect your kids, you can't save them from everything?
It wasn't even that mess. I mean, I'm not a parent myself. I'm an aunt and a godmother. So, and there are plenty of things that I would love to protect my nieces and nephews from. But as I've learned over the years, just like people tried to protect me from stupid stuff, growing up, you kind of have to learn on your own way. But I think the idea was more just to show that no matter, you want to make God laugh, you make a plan, so Ronnie was a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Austere mother, and Lorraine had this incredibly restricted life. She, from the day she was born, she had her destiny, she had her mission, and that's all her entire life was going to be about. So she thought in her mind, well, if I do the opposite of that, I give my daughter freedom, obviously there has to be rules, but I give her freedom. I let her express herself, be who she is, then she won't ever want to run away like I did. Completely foregoing the fact that, kids are going to resent their parents no matter what. That's just, I think that's just hormones. But, but I'm not the doctor here.
No, you're right. You're right. You're pushing a rebel to, a further boundary. You can't even see the horizon anymore.
And if you think about it, I mean, Lorraine in and of herself had that sort of rebellious streak. So she shouldn't be surprised when her daughter shares that same rebellious streak. But she thought it was more of an environmental thing. And I think that's what she was sort of banking on, this idea of, well, my mom was so strict that I had to run away. Now I'm going to be the cool mom, for my daughter. And then my daughter's going to love me. She's never going to want to run away. Well, yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So, Doc, I know you had a note here about the children that were taken from the home.
Right. I mean, I know that's her job, and she was putting her effort into it. She wanted to get to the bottom of these cases, especially when she realizes why these children were taken. But at the same time, I definitely noticed one particular part to this where not all the children are looking to be saved.
Yeah.
And I think that was incredibly powerful. I wanted you, if you could, to just talk on that a little bit. The idea that, this was an opportunity. This is something where, children, maybe they didn't want it to happen this way, but they may have a fresh start.
Yeah. Jessica Gallagher was the young woman who specifically wanted a fresh start. She was one of the young women who was taken, but it was less dramatic than what we see between Joanna and Mika. Their abduction, or Mika's abduction, rather. Jessica was in a very bad situation, and this for her was an opportunity to go from someplace where she had zero control to someplace where she would be at least, there was at least the illusion of control, or the illusion of her own agency. And, when I was writing it, part of me, the original ending was very, very different. When I had originally plotted this out several years ago, the original ending was very different. But I decided to sort of tweak it. And originally it was this idea of like Lorraine was going to force these kids to go home come hell or high water. And it was not going to be this like pleasant, happy ending. I mean, it's still not that happy of an ending, but I mean, it's happier than originally thought.
Okay.
But I wanted there to be that moment between Lorraine and Jessica where she says, it's okay, I'm going to be okay. Despite the fact that Lorraine's head is saying, no, but the only way you're going to be okay is if you're going to be back at home, not realizing that home is not the best place for everybody. And definitely because Jessica was, in an abusive household, that was not the best place for her. And I think Lorraine had to stop for a second and think, because Lorraine was thinking about Jessica's dad being like, as a parent, the only thing you want is your kid back, whether or not you're garbage parent or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really thought very long and hard about how I was going to frame that and how I was going to allow that to happen originally, because I didn't want it to be like a screw you dad moment. I wanted it to be more of an as opposed to being like a negative moment. I wanted it to be more of a positive, empowering moment for Jessica and for Sansa, that they leave together. And it's this idea of we're going to protect each other.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you felt that resonated with you. So at least I did something right.
Well, I think that was just amazing in the sense that, as you said, with most parents, we may not have all of the perfect ideas, but to be honest, when things get stressful, we like to think our word is the final word. And our children still teach. Even at a young age, I still learn from my daughter. I'm just saying, I really did appreciate that. There are times where she'll surprise me with things that I just don't think about. And I can't say that she's wrong just because I'm older.
Yeah.
So
there's that instinct to do that. Because, you know, and I feel this with, you know, godkids and nieces and nephews, this instinct to be like, well, you know, you might be right this time, kid, but don't get used to it. At the same time, you're more or less just telling them to sort of blindly follow those who are older than they are, which isn't exactly the right way to go. You know, like I remember, you know, when I was a kid, it was always, you know, if you're in trouble, find a police officer. That's not always the good thing. You know?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. That part, I had a little different experience. I'm not going to get into details about that. But
yeah, but like that's what we were. I mean, my dad was an auxiliary police officer, so that was, you know, what we learned. If you get in trouble, you find a police officer. When I got a little older, I realized that that's not the way to go. You get in trouble, you find somebody else. You know, I always say, like, you know, people thinks cops and clergy are infallible, and yeah, that ain't the case. But it's, you know, sort of like this thing that's ingrained in you or ingrained in your parents that then they try to sort of chisel it into you. And it's this, you know, not necessarily might makes right, but this idea of like, well, you just need to listen to me because this is who, you know, I'm the parent, you're the child, and you need to shut up and listen. And I think a lot of times parents don't want to deal with, like, you know, they don't want to hear that other parents are garbage parents, or they don't want to hear that their kid's having an issue. You know, so when Lorraine first meets Jessica and says to her, like, come on, I got to take you home. She's like, I'm not going there. I'm not going home. I'm fine where I am, and you're not going to make me. And, you know, I know you think you're right, but you're not. So, you know, your dinner will be here in a couple of minutes. Sit your ass back down.
Yeah. There are people who want authority to be respected because it's authority and that's tautological and doesn't actually have any basis in reality. So, moving to Ronnie.
Yes.
Ronnie. Okay.
Yeah.
Ronnie. Okay. She starts off like just from jump as just a very unlikable character. I think.
Well, she's the villain. She has to be unlikable.
Well, not every villain is necessarily unlikable,
True.
but I think here it's just we cut. You know, we're introduced to her where it's just bam, you know, and the contrast between her and her sister is obvious again from jump. And I'm just curious from a writing standpoint, what is the source of the prejudice and the hatred towards the Chlamybians?
The Cholumbans.
Cholumbans. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Just make up all the words, Erica. Just make them all up. Basically, I have an outline that sort of takes this story, you know, 60,000 years ago. And basically it comes from this idea of, you know, basically 60,000 years ago, you had these two types of people that were very similar living on this, you know, plot of land, planet, whatever. And this big asteroid comes and slams in and slams into the ground and reveals the crystal, the Elesha, that everyone's after. And once they're exposed to it, you now start to begin to see the difference. There are evolutionary changes that happen in these two types of people. So whereas in the beginning, they all sort of looked kind of similar, now the crystal has awakened any evolutionary differences. So the Cholambans start, turning into, with every generation, they start turning into these sort of like lumbering rock people. Not to sound, when I use the phrase lumbering, I don't mean that they're, imbecilic, but, they're sort of these big hulking, the Thing, Ben Grimm kind of characters.
Yeah, they're brutes.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas who are known as the Joannas are the ones that sort of become like these sort of lithe, more human-like characters. And there was no difference really between them until this crystal was revealed to them. And that turned into this like crazy rift. And after the asteroid fell, the first generation was when people were started being born with that birthmark. And if you look at it, it's a fireball because it's the asteroid coming to Earth. And so, so once people started being born with that birthmark, it was very, very few. So those were, of course, there was something special about them. Nobody else has this thing. So they're our de facto leaders. And it just sort of, you hand somebody a crown, basically a scepter, what's going to happen? So, generations upon generations upon generations of this sort of warring factions. And, just look at Earth, this idea of fighting over resources. I mean, this is not a new idea. In one interview, somebody said, "Where'd you come up with the idea?" And I'm like, history? Well, think about it. I mean, you think about all the resources that are mined from the Earth. The people who are doing the physical labor are not benefiting from, whether you're talking about precious metals for our cell phones and our laptops and our headphones and all that other stuff. If you're talking about, even diamonds, because diamonds are used in manufacturing and things like that, oil, everything. These are the people who are the ones that are doing the backbreaking work are not the ones that are actually benefiting from the hardest of labor. So what used to be this sort of like, ignorance is bliss kind of world, automatically there's now something that everybody wants and there's something to fight over where there wasn't before. And that's when, there are sort of peace treaties throughout every once in a while, but then the next, crop of leaders that come in, some of them don't want to play nice. So, when we start seeing Krillista and Ronnie, we learn about how their parents tried very, very hard to make a peace treaty, and it was working and everything was cool. Things were tense, but nobody was like stabbing other people randomly. Things were okay. Everything was cool. All right, fine. But Rani was the one who just, first of all, she felt like her sister was too soft. And, why does she get the throne? Well, because she was the older one. And, and also she had the big, fat birthmark right on her face. And, well, I don't think she's right. And her sister literally says, she's like, well, then you would make a really poor queen. So Rani has to find a way. She feels that the status quo is the subjugation of the Cholamba, not just the fighting, but the pure and utter subjugation. And so she feels that the only way that she can get it to what is, quote, right in her mind, in her twisted sense, is this idea of then, well, the war has to start again and we've got to start it and we've got to start it with a bang. And she does in a horrible, horrible way.
Yeah, that's pretty much a guarantee for something like that to happen. That was pretty poignant. The idea that, there's that really spoke to me just in general. The idea that people that feel unheard one way or another if you wait long enough, they will scream out, or they will shout out, or they will punch out, or they will do whatever is necessary.
I was going to say
And
this is very timely, and prophetic in a sense.
Well, yeah, there was. I wrote a story in 2013 about Russians hacking the election. So don't even start with me about prophecy.
Oh man! Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, it's long story short. A Russian sleeper cell agent, working an ice cream truck in downtown Manhattan. And it was 2013, and I went back. I went back to the archives. I went through all my boxes, and I was looking at. I was like, no way, really? Damn it, Erica. But if I tried to sell it back then, nobody would have believed me.
Well, I think I forgot who said this, but storytellers don't just write fiction; they write the future. That is so incredible.
In a scary, scary way.
Yes.
But Anthony, as you were saying, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say that it's, I do enjoy that portion of it. And I am hopeful that despite all of the bloodshed that happens in the story, that the ending where everyone works together and realizes that this resource can be for the benefit of all is maybe the ending that we can achieve at some point, hopefully with far less bloodshed than happened with the Chalambans and the Junedans. But, fingers crossed, it's the eternal optimist in me. But the other thing I wanted to mention about Ronnie is her narcissism is on full display throughout the entire story. And what I like.
What are you talking about, man? She gives people plenty of choices.
Well, that's what I was going to say. She claims to give people choices, especially with Joanna, but it's only a choice that works for her. It's like, is it Hobson's choice? I think is from a storytelling standpoint, where it's like you don't really actually have a choice. You're presented with this false option, but it's my way, or there is another way, but you don't want that way.
Yeah, Joanna comes into this story with a lot of resentment, and you don't even need the resentment to be easily manipulated as a teenager. You really don't. And so the resentment against Lorraine versus this idea of, I'm kind of a freak on earth, but now look at me, I'm a princess and I get to live in this fabulous place, and my grandmother looks like my mom. Like, she's like gorgeous, and holy crap, like this is like the life that my mom kept for me all these years. Like, what the hell? So that she was just ripe for manipulation, and that's exactly what Ronnie did. She said, okay, great. Obviously my daughter seems to be some type of a lost cause. I might be able to, milk my granddaughter for this and see what I can get out of this one. Because at this point, I need somebody who's going to take the throne. And if I can manipulate them from scratch, then maybe this will be pretty good. Things don't work out that way, though.
No, they do not. So, now, when we spoke about 12 Devils Dancing, one of the things I said,
different story.
Oh, I was going to say, yes, a very, very different story. But one of the things that I noticed there, and I also did catch that it made your website, is about the secondary characters and how well developed they are and how they are fascinating. And for me, Trodaire is a very fascinating character because I find him to have so many divided loyalties.
Yes.
Between the crown and Lorraine and
Carol.
I wasn't going to name the character, but okay, yes, Carol. So he has so many divided loyalties, and yet he still ultimately always tries to do the right thing.
He is so tortured.
Yes, and I wanted to give him a hug at the store, because I was like, you poor man.
He was originally, when I was originally talking to publishers, they wanted the story to be 5 issues. They wanted it to be a shorter story. And I thought, oh, okay, let's see what happens. And So I started thinking about him, Bajek, and A Gaul as these sort of almost throwaway characters. But when we landed with Comixology Originals, and they said, you know what, tell the story you want to tell. And, you know, God bless them for that. Tell the story you want to tell. Take your 8 issues. I said, all right. So I started really sort of fleshing them out more. I really had a lot of fun writing Bajek and A Gaul and their relationship and their back and forth, because everybody knows a couple like that, that just bickers, and the way they act toward each other, you're like, man, they must hate each other, and they don't, and they love each other so much, but they're the ones that are constantly sniping and bickering at each other. So I was like, I got to get that in there. But I also wanted to show, you know, there's, for lack of a better term, there's a human face to war. And that's why I wanted Vector and Janchi and Deco to be the human face for that. I wanted them to, like, when Janchi takes Lorraine's hands and basically says, like, we've been lucky. Our son has not been killed. We're the lucky ones here that he survived. But do you know how many parents haven't had that? And it's almost like a mom to mom conversation. And that's really what convinces Lorraine to say, okay, I'm going to do it, is this sort of mom to mom moment. And even though she's like a very minor character, she plays a very pivotal role. And being you know, and Deco sort of being like the face of, you know, the army, the face of the rebellion, kind of, you know, at the same time, because Deco also has his drawn loyalties, you know, like he's basically like a double agent. This poor kid is this like double agent at this, you know, young age, you know? So he's, you know, has to decide between, you know, trying to protect his family and the resistance versus trying not to get found out by the queen. And, you know, God knows what she would do to me, kind of thing. So I wanted to show a human face of war. I wanted to show that, you know, kids got to grow up really, really fast. You know, I thought a lot about, you know, you think about what happens in Yemen, what happens in Syria, you know, a lot of Middle Eastern countries where there is conflict, you know, and these kids, you know, 12, 13 years old, or even, you know, parts of West Africa, you know, you see these kids that are very young that are, you know, you see them on the news and they're carrying guns and you're like, oh my God, when I was 12, I wasn't thinking about that kind of thing. So there's like a human face to this that is very, very tragic. And I even if I just touched on it, I wanted it to be there. And everybody has like a huge backstory, and I've got it all written out, and it's really, really complex. And, you know, I'm so prolific.
Yeah.
But
oh no, we definitely appreciate that about you.
But you know, I wanted the audience, I wanted the reader to say, you know, yeah, we only spend a little bit of time with these characters, but they at least feel like real people.
Yeah. I wanted to just touch on a part of that once again, I don't know, this is my strange brain that I picked up with regards to Troder. So when they're doing basically what's an arranged marriage, it's pointed out very quickly, and I apologize, I don't have the proper vocabulary, but when the queen pretty much snipes at you about the fact that, you know, you're still different from the rest of us, but, you know, we'll let that slide because, you know, you're in with us now. Basically, he doesn't have magic, but he's being involved in the magical royal court.
Because he's loyal.
You know, clearly doesn't. That's, yeah. I mean, it's incredible. That says something about the strength a character would have in a circumstance like that. Like, how much would you have gone through in your life where you get that level of trust, and then ultimately, you know, have to make some really hard decisions in a different direction.
Yeah. I wanted there to be I kind of thought about it in the sense of like Superman. Okay. So Superman on Krypton's regular Joe. Superman on Earth is super. When Lorraine came to Earth, she had her powers. So here she's extraordinary. When she goes back home, she's untrained, untested. And, you know, Ronnie even makes the point saying, you might be hot shit over there, excuse me, you know, but over here, like, you're nothing. to the point where even the guys that don't have any magic can kick your ass. You know, I wanted there to be a character who wasn't like everybody else. And as we learned, Tredair is different in many, many ways. And, yep. You know, there's a bit of a love triangle there, or I guess a love square, if you think about it.
Square, yeah.
But I wanted there to be this idea that the queen wanted Lorraine to marry a pure blood. And despite the fact that he had no magic, he was still pure blood. And if you think about it, he's way more unique than anybody else. Being, you know, like one of 1,000 or one of, 5,000 that doesn't have magic. But at the same time, he was still on the battlefield. He was still there, and he still sort of bought into the idea of this is what we have to do until Carol gets injured and he has that interaction with Bajak, and Bajak says, what are you doing here?
Right. Yep. That's the ultimate question with any battle.
Yeah. Why are you here?
What are you fighting for?
And if you're not benefiting from this, and you're not one of the elite, for lack of a better term, you're not one of these magical elite kids, then what the hell are you doing here? Swinging your sword around? Come on. Give it a thought. So.
Yeah, like I said, very, very well done. Very, very interesting as always with the secondary characters. Another secondary character that we see a little bit of, not a whole lot of, is Michael.
Yes.
And the main question I had is just like, it just kind of surprised me. He is completely unfazed when Lorraine shows up. He's just like, yeah, cool. All right, I'm gonna go surf. Like, I just picture him in my head, like my Uncle Kevin, rest in peace, always was just like, hey man, just it's cool, man. It's whatever. And he just has this complete nonchalant. Is he like the stereotypical like high stoner surfer dude? Is he like Jeff Spicoli?
No. He's not like a high surfer dude because he was going into the army.
I was gonna say it's a military.
He was going into the army. He was a hell of a mechanic. There are very few people that I've met in this world that just sort of take things. They live so in the moment that they just take things as they come. And there are some people that have that gift. They genuinely have that gift. And him having that sort of loosen up, to be a little looser with things was a very good influence on Lorraine in general. Because you see where she was coming from. He has this like, hey, there's this random alien chick on the beach. Can I give you a lift somewhere? Like, he really was he reminds me of a couple of people I knew in high school who knows where the hell they are now. But I mean, he's just has that gift of just, I'm just going to take it as it comes. I'll think of the answer in 5 minutes.
We all have those people from high school. And
yeah.
I think we all wonder what the hell happened to them.
But Joanna kind of has a little bit of that in herself too. This idea of like, just roll with it, and she sort of, again, hormones, play a hell of a role, but she sort of, tries to sort of roll with things and okay, well, my friend's getting kidnapped. Let's just do it. Or, hey, there's these two like good looking guys at the mall that offer to give us a ride, even though never get in the car with strangers. Hello. So,
yep.
Yeah. So
some teenagers.
Yeah. Damn unsupervised teens. as our friend Chad from P3 show would say, damn unsupervised teens. So a couple last questions. Do you have any ideas without giving too much away? Do you have ideas for a potential sequel based on the way the story ends?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
that's declarative. I'm certainly not going to ask you. I'm not going to probe you for anything further.
I do. I would love to explore things even before this, like that whole, 60,000 years ago kind of thing. Like I would love to go, 2001 Space Odyssey on it. I think that there's a lot of room to explore more stuff. I would have loved to have made this like a 30 issue series and really sort of branched out. Obviously things didn't work out that way, but I think that the foundation has been laid for some really good stories. I mean, I'd love to explore Deco's story more. I would love to explore Trodaire and Carol more. Carol is a little bit like the other side of Michael, in the sense that like this sort of like take things as they come, don't really take life too seriously kind of thing. And unfortunately that has consequences when it comes to relationships.
Indeed.
Right.
But even after that, he's still kind of like, whatever, we're still friends. Everything's cool. Like he doesn't, his number one thing is let's get the queen off the throne. And then, maybe we'll talk about something serious. But aside from that, hey, let's have some drinks, mess around, the cool guy.
Yeah.
Make out with the princess,
I do think that there is sufficient lore in the story and the background that's been laid that you can definitely mine that for a future series.
I mean, hell, to be honest, like my medical mind came to bat where Elysia itself, like that as a quote unquote substance. I'm like, the way that, the royal family, how they rely on that stuff, but can't do anything with it. I'm like, man, this is a drug ring.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like, it actually, the idea was that, because it's been around now for all these years, it's been around for like 15,000 years, it's in the atmosphere. So, when De Gaul says to her, that's the problem. And it says to Lorraine, that's the problem. You screwed all of us up. She's like, well, you can't, it's in the water. It's in our air. It's in everything. Like it's part of our economy. It's part of, excuse me, it's part of everything. It's like, yeah, you can't remove it, but you can find a way to make it work for everybody else. And that's kind of the thing. But yeah, it's a power source. It's it helps heal certain people. It can drive you mad if you're not careful, kind of thing. So,
yep.
But the interesting thing about the sort of the evolution of these two types of beings is that one is more physically resistant to certain things and one is a little more delicate. We always joke about, human beings are the top of the food chain on Earth, but we're really physically delicate. Like we really shouldn't be. Let's be honest, and you see how, yes, the Joannas are, the more human-like people, but yeah, they've got magic, but you can still fell them pretty easily.
Yeah, we're only at the top of the food chain because of our brain. It's certainly not anything because of our physical ability. So yeah, that's all. Like I said, there's so much there, and I really do hope that at some point down the line, whether it's Comixology or somebody else, that you do get an opportunity to go back and tell some of those stories. Because I think, like I said, it's fascinating, and the groundwork that has been laid for the universe building, I think, is astounding. Last question, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the story per se, but obviously the industry is reeling from the loss of Dennis O'Neil, and I just wanted to know, as a writer, if there was any influence that he had on you, whether or not you had a chance to meet him. He was, certainly a legend in the comics industry, and I just wanted to know some of your thoughts on him and the stories that he told over decades.
I never had the chance to meet Denny O'Neil. I would have loved to. I worked at a studio with Neil Adams for almost 8 years, so Denny was a staple in terms of conversations because he and Neil worked together for so long. I mean, they had Green Lantern, Green Arrow run is just, if you want to talk about, social issues, it's funny when people say, oh, keep politics out of comics. Well, then don't read that run.
We've actually had that discussion on the podcast.
Yes, we did a whole episode on it. Yep.
Yes, stay away from that run and half of DC Comics in the 70s, but I think as an editor, certainly as a writer, he helped craft some seminal stories between his work, sort of crafting and curating up and coming creators as an editor. Everybody I know whoever worked directly with him said he was a total class act, and I would have loved to have met him, but his work stands as literary. People think that comics are just comics, funny books, whatever. That man wrote literature. He really did, it's a huge loss just in general. Just, the world always needs more art, more creations. And, that's kind of leaving a big hole with where these, great stories came in. I did learn actually that he was the one who named Optimus Prime.
Yes.
I did not know that. Because my husband is a huge Transformers fan, and he had mentioned that, and I was like, really? So now that's even a bigger thing because I was a huge Transformers fan as a kid, and so now it's like, oh man, Denny O'Neil influenced that part too, because we all know that when Optimus turned gray and died, like we all died.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, he was a Titan.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Definitely be mourned.
Absolutely. And we said on our social media that he was responsible for some of the greatest stories in fiction, period. Like comics or otherwise, just in fiction. Yeah. He was an amazing writer. And his legacy will live on in those incredible stories. So that's gonna wrap things up. So Erica, thank you so much as always for taking the time to speak with us. And
thank you for having me.
So I guess we'll wrap it up with first off, where can they find you on the interwebs?
On the interwebs. Okay, so on the Twitters, I am Erica Schultz 42. On the Instagrams, I am Erica Schultz Writes, WRITES. You can go to my website, ericaschultzwrites.com. And yeah, that's it. I'm kind of on Facebook, not really. I very rarely go, so
Facebook. It's probably for the best.
It's probably
stay away from Facebook.
Yeah.
And lastly, what project are you working on now, or is there any details that you can give us, or when can we expect to see the next thing that you've got in the pipeline?
There is a mini series that I actually just finished writing. We will be recording a panel for San Diego Comic-Con, for the Comic-Con at Home, to announce it. I'm also editing for Mad Cave Studios. So we're going to be announcing, hopefully by the end of July, early August, possibly. I'm not saying anything official, but we're going to be announcing the creative team on a book that I'm editing, which is a lot of fun. And the creative team is really some awesome people.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to that as always. I'm sure whatever projects you are working on in the pipeline are going to be just as fantastic as everything we've read from you so far. And looking forward to bringing you back for time number 4. On the show when
I got to work toward that jacket.
There you go. Here you go.
Yep.
We'll start squirreling away some of the Patreon money now to get you the jacket.
Button, just make a cheesy button. It'll be totally fine. It's all right. Just with a big 5 on it.
There you go. There you go. I think we can swing that.
Nice.
So, so that's going to wrap it up for us. Our upcoming episodes, we've got Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then support systems in comics, and then Redacted, a character that we are very excited to do an episode on, but we're going to hold off just yet on officially announcing that until maybe either release day or at the very least recording.
It's Moon Knight.
No, it's not. No, we've already done Moon Knight. We already.
I love it.
Did Moon Knight. But,
I know everyone's gonna be guessing.
I'm sure everyone will be guessing. I mean, because we've got so many big names that we still haven't done yet. But in any case, you can find this on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. We've got our email addresses, capesonthecouch@gmail.com. Our shows are all available on our website at capesonthecouch.live. We have a TeePublic and a Patreon site, so you can go to either of those and financially support the show if you so choose. Doc, anything you want to add before we head out?
No, because I don't think this episode is going to be forgotten.
And there's his pun, as always. Erica Schultz, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.